materialism alone does not explain what they have studied and observed from their patients.
What would be your case for that? These are not just the brain creating a dream or glitching in some way, because I'm sure that that's one of the alternative thoughts behind this is, yeah, there's these commonalities because when the human brain is, at the end of its lifespan, it generates certain familiar or, certain repetitive hallucinations or whatever. So I'm curious,
Yeah.
go through these commonalities, but if you can kind of say, here's one explanation and here's why you a sort of a materialist explanation and why you think maybe it doesn't hold up, if that's not too tall of an order.
No, in fact, in chapter 2 of the new book of Imagine the God of Heaven, I write about science skeptics and NDEs. And I'm talking about alternative explanations, which I wrestled with all those. How do you know it's just not hallucination, or it's endorphins, chemicals, kind of like a DMT like chemical that floods your brain as you're dying. And people say, oh well, DMT, it has the same kind of symptoms that people report in near-death experiences, or fighter pilot syndrome, is this
Mm-hmm.
anoxia where the brain is lacking oxygen, and they see this tunnel and a light at the end. Well, that's just that tunnel that near-death experiencers talk about. I go into all that. In fact, I was just watching a video by Dr. Michael Shermer, who's atheist and
Mm-hmm.
editor or past editor of Skeptic magazine, and he's talking about these alternate explanations, and he says we know for sure that these are brain based. In other words, it's just something happening in the brain. So I won't give you all 10 of my arguments. I'll leave that if you want to read the book in chapter 2. But the top three for me, first of all, when people clinically die, what they say is they leave their body, but they still have a body. They're still themselves, and they say it's like I have a spiritual body, but not just with five senses, more like with 50 or 100 senses. All these senses we don't even have, and not only that, but initially they find themselves still in the room where their resuscitation is taking place, usually up by the ceiling, watching. And so this is key because when they're resuscitated, they come back. And by the way, let me just say, these are not just crazy, whacked out people. I mean, the people I've interviewed, and most of the ones I report on in these books, are spine surgeons who had a near death experience, commercial airline pilots, bank presidents, CEOs. I mean, why would you go make up crazy stories about, dying, going to heaven, and seeing God when all it's going to do is hurt your career? Like they don't have a motive, a financial motive. They have plenty of money and they have status. So why would they be saying this? And yet those are the people that I've interviewed. And so one of the things though that, Shermer says commonly, you just can't know. There's no way to check it out. It's just something that is my experience, and maybe it's true, maybe it's not, but it's in the brain. However, when people come back and they start to report things that they saw from up above the room while they had no brain waves, how do you explain that? So I'll give you a couple of examples. I report on Mary, who was in a hospital in London. This is in the 90s, and she's in the hospital. She's giving childbirth, but bleeds to death. So her EEG is flat. She says she leaves her body. She travels through this tunnel to this place of light, and this who she knew. She grew up Catholic, but she'd kind of gone away from all of that. But she said, I knew this was God. There was no doubt. And the unconditional love I felt was far beyond the unconditional love of a parent. They have a conversation. She sees her life. These are some of the commonalities I'll go over. But then God says to her, your son is going to live and he's going to need you. You have to go back. And she argues, which is common because people don't want to leave. Like
Hmm.
this life, it turns out, is the shadow. That they say is the real thing. That's like
Hmm.
where you want to be. But she comes back, and as she's coming back into the room, she passes through the ceiling and notices a red sticker on the top side, the ceiling side of a ceiling fan. And she's resuscitated. She's trying to tell the doctors and nurses this incredible experience. Of course, as is common, they kind of think she's psychotic, right? It's just loss of blood or, um, anesthesia or something. But she gets a hold of one nurse and she describes exactly what the nurse did and said and where she walked. And the nurse realized she had no EEG. She had no brainwaves. How could she know this? And Mary says to her, I'll prove it to you. Go get a ladder, look on the top side of that ceiling fan, and there's a red sticker, and here's what it says. And the nurse gets help from an orderly. They look, and sure enough, there's the sticker, exactly what Mary said. Now, if I just heard one of those stories, I'd go, oh, that's nice. Another urban legend, right? Story for the
Yeah.
internet.
Yep.
But there are thousands of them. What people don't realize, 2019, the European Academy of Neurology reported a study done across 35 countries, and they found that 5% of people that were at clinical death or right near it reported a near-death experience. 5% across 35 countries. You're talking about millions and millions of people. The Gallup poll in America reported about the same thing, 1 out of 25 Americans. So that's 13 million Americans.
Can I, on that note, really quick, just ask, do you think that that has always been the case and it's just now being talked about more? Or do you think that for whatever reason, this is something that's sort of on the rise? Because it does seem like this is a conversation that's more popular today than it was 30 years ago, but that to me seems weird. This is an email that I got from a subscriber of this YouTube channel. I've been hoping to find something like this for a while. One morning a few weeks ago, I prayed to God to send some help. A couple hours later, I heard an ad for this app. I immediately downloaded it. It has been everything I was looking for. Relay is a community-based app to help you on your porn-free journey. There's a lot of different features in Relay that make it effective. I want you to check it out for yourself in the link in the description below. It gives you daily accountability, evidence-based skills, and a supportive community that will enable you to break free from the porn cycle if you are currently caught in one. And like I said, the statistics around the amount of people that are frankly horrifying. So that's why I care about this. Relay is so confident, in fact, that you will see results in 30 days, that they will give you a money back guarantee if you don't. So there really is no downside to this in that sense if you are currently trapped in pornography and want to get out. If Relay works for you, amazing, absolutely worth it. If for whatever reason it doesn't, you don't lose any money. Don't keep this in the shadows anymore. Don't punt it to your future self to solve. Take a stand today. Let this be the day that things change for you. Click the link in the description. Use my code WISDOM to get 7 days free. Join Relay if you're struggling. Thank me later. Now back to the video.
Plato reported one. So it goes all the way back to the Republic. I believe the Apostle Paul may have had a near-death experience. In Acts chapter 14 in the New Testament, it says that Paul was in Lystra, which is modern day Greece, Turkey area, and a mob turns on him and stones him to death. And they drag him out of the city and leave him for dead, but he somehow resuscitates. Now he says in 2 Corinthians 12, he says, 14 years ago, whether I was in my body or out of my body, I don't know, only God knows, but I was taken up to heaven and heard and saw things inexpressible. So maybe that was that 14 years ago in Lystra. Paul talks about a lot of the same things, and that's what I'm trying to show, that there are a lot of the same commonalities that near-death experiencers talk about that are actually in the scriptures. So I also report on a person from the 1800s who wrote down her experience. So it's not new, but with modern medical resuscitation bringing so many more people back, and quite honestly, with our globally connected world, I mean, I interviewed 70 people on, like I said, every continent for this new book, Imagine the God of Heaven. I couldn't have done that even 7 years ago. And so I do think, I don't know what the prevalence was before, the last 50 years, but I know there has been way more research. The other thing people don't realize is like, this is not just, you know, researcher, author, pastor like me. Medical doctors have studied this. So I chronicle in Imagine Heaven a lot of the medical doctors, like cardiologists, who became convinced that that materialism alone does not explain what they have studied and observed from their patients. Like
Hmm.
Dr. Pim van Lommel is a cardiologist in Holland, and he reports on a guy who was brought into the ER in the hospital who he was found dead in a park. It took like 30 minutes for the ambulance to get there. They were working on him, but never revived him. He comes into the ER, and the nurse was trying to give him oxygen, had to ventilate him, found dentures in his mouth. So took the dentures out, put him in the lower drawer of the crash cart, ventilates him. They shock him. They get his heart going in the ER, but he never came out of coma. They wheel him into the ICU, and a week later, he comes out of coma. And the nurse comes in to give him medications, and he says, "You know where my lost dentures are. You're the one who took them and put them in the lower drawer of that cart with all the bottles on it. Go get them." And then he goes on to explain that he was in the room up above trying to get everybody's attention, but no one would listen to him. And he described who was in the room, the doctors and nurses, what they did, and how that nurse put his dentures in the crash cart. And that's where they found his dentures.
Hmm.
And Pim van Lommel, this cardiologist, wrote this up in The Lancet, Europe's most prestigious medical journal. Another cardiologist, Dr. Sabin, who set out to disprove near-death experiences, because he had never heard one of his patients talk about this. And there's a reason for that, because when they commonly talk about it, they're talking about something they say is more real than this. Well, what's more real than this, right? Um, and many times the doctors or nurses kind of give them that, like, you know, this is psychosis look.
Hmm.
And so
Hmm.
they shut up about it because it's hard to describe in words. But Sabin set out and did research for 5 years trying to disprove them, and changed his mind and wrote an article. He wrote a book, but he also wrote an article in the Journal of the American Medical Association. So there have been 900 scholarly articles written on this subject showing how and why these verifiable observations ground this experience in our reality.
That's what I
So,
think is so interesting about it, is that it seems like, I'm putting myself in the shoes of a skeptic here. And it seems like that you are kind of left with a few choices. One is you can just say all of these people are crazy, or all of these stories are just lies, or there's truth to this. And I think that the more that the research comes out and the more people, the volume of people who are claiming these same types of stories, I think it just becomes more and more unlikely that there's either that many crazy people just like, making stuff up, or that many people on this huge collective lie, even though, like you said, they're medical professionals, they're serious, people. So I think that becomes less likely. And like you said, in a lot of these instances, there's not a clear profit motive. You don't really get rewarded, or you don't really become famous for it. It doesn't really benefit you in any particular way. So it seems like it slants more towards there's really something going on here. Then add on top of that the fact, some of these details that you're describing, where in other words, if even one of these things is true, and tell me if you feel like I'm jumping too far with this, but if even one of these things is true, where a person's brain is turned off, is basically dead, but they're relaying information in a location that their body wasn't, to me, that indicates that there is a part of what a human being is that is not their body.
well, and, I mean, what is consistent? The most basic premise of science is what is consistently observed is real, right? So you can't repeat this like in a scientific experiment in a lab, though some movies have played around with that, right? But you do have preponderance of evidence. So there have been scientific studies done, like Dr. Jan Holden studied about 100 patients of cardiac arrest patients who claim to have a near-death experience and make observations that could be checked out. So verifiable observations. And what she found is that 92%, each patient may make 5 or 10 observations, right, of what happened in their resuscitation. 92% were completely accurate. Another 6% were mostly accurate, maybe a few details off. Only 2% were inaccurate. And that turned out to be one patient.
Hmm.
So like Dr. Sabum told me, he said, what these people were telling me about my resuscitation attempts, if I'd recorded it, I could have used it to train physicians in how to do resuscitation. There's no way they could have known that.
Hmm.
And yet they consistently are reporting that. So, like it can't be brain-based if they're reporting things with zero EEG, with a flat EEG. Where are these observations being stored?
Or if their brain, or if the memories or if the information is coming from a location that their brain isn't.
Right.